Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle and thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com. Join me at Sonic Cinema Patreon at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. I have got a good variety of music and movie related posts happening there. I just posted my second exclusive early access review for patrons for Alan J. Picula's All the President's Men. That will be on Sonic Cinema next month. But I've also got a couple of new looks at my music and my creative history, as well as I'm going to be doing some special posts for members, Patreons at DragonCon at the end of August. So that's patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. I hope you join me doing that. I'm pleased to be joined today by a writer and director primarily known for his work in genre. His short films include The Minions, Berenice, based on a Edgar Allan Poe story, Pickup, and Slapface. One of the reasons we're going to be talking right now, though, is for his feature film Black Wake, which just got picked up for distribution for home media through Sony Entertainment. And it's a wonderful riff on the found footage genre as well as the monster genre. And I definitely hope you check that out. It comes out on August 7th. But for now, I'm pleased to be joined by writer and director Jeremiah Kipp. I'm pleased to be joined by a writer-director today whose work is something I've become familiar with over the past few years, primarily in short films, with a particularly great one based on Edgar Allan Poe, Berenice, which I thought was quite striking when I saw it a few years ago. He's also done work, shorts called The Minions and Pickup, and his most recent one that I've seen is Slapface. Part of the main reason for this interview at this time, though, is he has a feature film inspired by the work of Lovecraft called Black Wake that is going to be released on Sony Entertainment home media on August 7th, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And I'm pleased to be joined by Jeremiah Kipp today. Thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Brian.
The first question I tend to start off with everybody, it's a pretty general one. What exactly inspired you to get into movies?
Well, I grew up in Rhode Island, which weirdly is H.P. Lovecraft's country, and it was very rural. I grew up with my grandparents, and I don't know. I guess the very first impulse was I always liked to draw, and my grandparents were really big on stories, so I was reading a lot of Stephen King and comic books and things like that. And when my grandparents got a VHS camcorder just to record family picnics and weddings and stuff like that, I immediately saw it as a way to tell stories and to get all my friends together and be like, all right, you guys are zombies and you're going to be attacking the house, because I loved Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead so much. George Romero was just one of those very early inspiring filmmakers. I mean, all the movies I saw when I was a kid were inspiring. I mean, I loved Blade Runner, but you can't really watch Blade Runner and be like, yeah, I'm going to go out and make that. Whereas George Romero, you felt like it was like a bunch of people who you might know in real life who grabbed a camera and said, we're going to go out and tell a story about stuff that could happen to you if the supernatural were right at your door. So movies like Night of the Living Dead and Martin just felt so personal, and they felt so accessible, and they felt so immediate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I said, wow, you could actually really go do this. You could actually go and make things. And that's when I started making stuff with my friends. And we made a bunch of movies when I was in high school. Our most ambitious one was this crazy 3 hour long adaptation of The Stand, that
Oh
that
wow.
plague novel by Stephen King. It was total rubbish, but we had an amazing time doing it. Uh, and Yeah, it was more by making stuff, that made me say, like, I love doing this. I love telling stories through pictures,
Mm-hmm.
and I said I want to do this for the rest of my life. So while along the years there were many movies that inspired me, it was also the doing of it, the making of things that inspired me, and it just created a belief of mine that work begets work, and the only way to get work is by continuing to work and create new things. And that's kind of been my motto since film school up till today.
There's obviously, based on what you just said, as well as the films of yours that I've seen, there's obviously a tilting towards the horror genre from you. What was it? Just the authors and the writers that sort of spoke to you as far as Stephen King and Lovecraft, or what was it about the horror genre that seemed to resonate with you?
I think it was that horror reminded me of like fairy tales.
Mm-hmm.
It's like reality plus. So Hansel and Gretel would have been like social realism about two starving kids if the witch hadn't shown up.
Mm-hmm.
And the witch is kind of what makes it something beyond. It's like something slightly beyond what we expect in our daily reality. I don't know, and it could have something to do with the fact that I grew up on a very isolated road. I mean, there were only a couple of houses on the
Mm-hmm.
road that I grew up on, so it was kind of remote. So I'd be walking around in the woods and feel like nobody else was around. And you started to just daydream and imagine, what if there were monsters out here?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's usual for me. It's like, I remember after a bunch of my friends saw Red Dawn, they were like, "Oh, we can't wait for the communists to invade because we know these woods," whatever.
Yeah.
But I always had an affinity to the monsters. I always loved, my grandfather really loved Frankenstein and King Kong and the Wolfman, and he loved showing me those movies. They really made a huge impression on him when he was a kid. And maybe his enthusiasm caught fire in me, because he was a kid during the Great Depression, and they would go see, Son of Frankenstein, where the hero swings to the rescue on a meat hook over a sulfur pit,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a monster. And it really brought him out of, the going home and not having any food. It's like movies were really cheap to go see. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess I felt that way too. I always loved creatures, and I always
Mm-hmm.
was fascinated by them. And occasionally a monster movie would come along that would blow your mind, like when John Carpenter did The Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that before or since. It has a little bit of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers thing and a little bit of the stuff that made Alien so great, but it's like a monster that can take on any shape, any form, and can imitate people.
Mm-hmm.
So it had this incredible ability to be whatever. It defied the imagination.
Yeah.
So it could be a friend 1 second, and then the next second be something from another world that you couldn't anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like that also was like, it wasn't just that you loved the monsters, it was also that they were something adult that was beyond, when I was a kid, it was something beyond my scope.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. And it made me feel like I wasn't being talked down to any more than I felt like fairy tales would talk down to me, because fairy tales are very gruesome. And then horror films, I also thought, were not sugarcoating or bullshitting me, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I found that really exciting.
Yeah. And when you were talking about your your youth, where you would go through the woods and stuff like that, and I mean your imagination would go on and stuff like that. That makes a lot of sense that you would have that experience sort of like in your head, because of the fact that when I watched Slapface a couple of days ago, it begins with a boy in the woods, and I always love I'm always fascinated when horror films use the woods and the forest as such a location because it is so ripe with possibilities for that genre, and that's one of the. And as somebody who was in Boy Scouts, it's like I, you have those moments where it's like you wonder, even though ultimately it's like you have other people around you, so it's like you feel like you're gonna be okay. Well, what if you aren't? And
Right.
just I will say I love. We'll go ahead and talk about it, Slapface for a second. It's like I love the way that you. I love that opening, those opening moments with the boy in Slapface because it's so it captures what I like best when filmmakers use the woods and use the forest as a location in horror, which is especially if they're taller trees, it's like it's so creepy. And the way the cinematography works, the way the music works, the way the lighting and all of that stuff, it 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 doesn't surprise me at all that you had um that experience because it does feel like it does feel that moment in particular in terms of Slapface does feel like it came from a personal place.
Yeah, it did. It was one of the more personal things I'd written in a while. Actually, I hadn't written anything in a long time. I, for a lot of my career, I've been doing work for hire, which I love doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I've directed 5 feature films and a bunch of short films, and almost none of them are stuff that I've written. The closest I got to writing anything in the past like 10 years was writing that adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe called Berenice,
Mm-hmm.
where some of the dialogue was stuff that I'd written, but I always felt like I was telling an Edgar Allan Poe story. And then with Black Wake, the H.P. Lovecraft feature, it was written by Jerry Janda, who wrote Painkiller and a bunch of other great horror stuff. And it's really Jerry's baby. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was honoring Jerry's stuff, but I would write the occasional scene just more as a piece of glue to kind of stitch the whole movie together. But I think doing that gave me the confidence to say, I'd like to try to direct something that I've written. And the Slapface script was something I'd written a while ago. It was a feature,
Mm-hmm.
like a 90-page feature length that, that I kind of just put on the shelf and was like, well, you know, I don't know if I'll ever find the money to make this. I'll just keep doing the work for hire.
Mm-hmm.
But my director of photography, Dominic Savilli, who I work with frequently, said, "Hey, Jeremiah, I've got $5,000. Just do like a proof of concept for Slapface. Write a 5-page version of it." And I was like, "Wow, like proof of concept." And he's like, "Yeah, And I was like, "Okay." And I wrote the thing, and immediately I thought, well, what are the parts that I need for a short? I was like, well, the woods, of course.
Mm-hmm.
The woods
Yeah.
are the first thing that comes to mind, because if you're walking around in the woods, as a kid, you would encounter weird animals or deer or something like that. But then
Mm-hmm.
occasionally, like there'd be something in the distance and you weren't sure what the hell it was. Maybe it was some hunter, or
Yeah.
maybe it was some animal, or maybe it was something that you don't know what it is. And if it's getting to be like dusk or twilight, then the shadows are really deep, the harder it is to tell what's going on and the scarier it gets. And there was occasional crime in where I grew up. I mean, like this sort of like, I grew up in a very lower class rural environment where people had guns and stuff like that. And sometimes people would get thrown in jail for doing stupid shit. So there was a certain, feeling of like, are there human monsters out there? Or, and then your
Mm-hmm.
imagination told, as you're a kid, you're like, are there real monsters out there?
Yeah.
And that was the jumping off point for the short and the feature. Now, as it turns out, that Dominic, who said he was going to give me $5,000, had no money at all. Uh, but we did a Kickstarter Indiegogo thing and got the money that way. And Dom was like, thank God, because I only had $1,000, and I just wanted to inspire you to go make something that was very close to your heart. And I'm incredibly grateful to him for that, because
Yeah.
as much as I love a lot of the shorts and features that I've done. Like Pickup is a short that's incredibly close to my heart, but like this was something that felt a lot more personal.
Mm-hmm.
When you're directing something that you've written that is not autobiographical but personal, it's like you are kind of following these nerve endings, and you are a little bit more like, gosh, I mean, I know I love this, but I don't know if anybody else will, but I have to follow the thread anyway. I have to do this just to express something I believe in very fully. I want to share it with everybody, and then ultimately, it's like whether people like it or not is not up to you. It's up to
Mm-hmm.
them. All you can do is create it as honestly as you can, and then put it out into the world.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like that. It's one of those I short films. I've seen now quite a few short films over the years. I've started about, I don't know, 9-10 years ago or so. I started reviewing short films after never really paying much attention to them, and then it's fascinating to me the way people find ways to tell complete stories in a short period of time. And that's one of the things that really that's one of the things that really intrigued me about um, your work, other than the fact that it feels more stylized, and from a visual standpoint, it feels more stylized and stylish and crisp than a lot of shorts that I see. And it's not a knock against them. It's just that's kind of the way it is at times. But the fact of the matter is, it's like it's watching one of your films. It's just very very striking. Just the level of craft that goes into it.
Well, I'm very grateful to hear that. I'm very grateful for your words. I mean, I care a lot. I don't really separate the technical making of aspects from the film from the content. I care as much about the pictures and telling stories through the pictures as I do of the dialogue and the performances. It all has to come together for me equally. But I love the short film format. It's like guys like Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft, who you mentioned earlier, made entire careers based on their short stories.
Mm-hmm.
They each only wrote one novel, and both their novels were terrible, but their short stories are brilliant, and perfect. And there are other writers who are not genre writers, like Raymond Carver, who just made a living doing short stories. And I wish that there was a market for I've made a lot of short films, and I pay the rent a lot of the time doing these work for hires, so I've made many short films, and I've made a pretty good living doing mostly that. But it's harder. But there's really no, you can't really survive on royalties off of a short film.
Right.
It's like
Right.
it's not really there's not really a market for it. But that said, I love other filmmakers who are prolific short filmmakers. There's a guy named Patrick Ray out in the Midwest, and he's made dozens of short films.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider him I love Patrick's work tremendously, and I always try to support him on social media, and I really admire him, and I always catch up with him at film festivals. We're always talking to each other on Messenger and so on. But but he's a guy where it's like, if there were a short film market, he would have the corner on the market for them. He's just told so many great Twilight Zone type stories through the short film format. And he's made, I think, 2 feature films, and he's done some television now. So we check in with each other on, hey, so what was your experience like working with famous actors, or whatever? Or
Yeah.
You worked with Brad Dourif's daughter, Fiona. What was she like? Oh, she was great. Oh, wonderful. I hope I get the chance to work with her sometime, and so on. So, but I find I like the short film format also because it all drives towards one peak moment, whereas like feature films, it's like you think of them more as like a series of mini arcs that build up to a final confrontation. It's more like climbing a very, very short hill,
Yeah.
versus climbing up the peaks of a mountain.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I'd like to segue a little bit into Black Wake, because actually
Sure.
the way you described feature film is actually it feels very much in the structure of what Black Wake is, which is it's ultimately it's a riff on the found footage genre in
Yeah.
terms of style. It's not in the same way of you think of Blair Witch or Paranormal Activity or anything like that. But it basically the way that the story is told is it's told in a very uh, third person with some first person cinematography in there, where it's basically recounting the beginnings of an outbreak.
That's right.
And I watched it earlier this year, I think February or something like that, and I was just completely engrossed in it. It's just I really enjoyed watching it. And what where what drew you to that story to tell?
Well, it's really funny. It's like the way this story even came about was writer Jerry Janda like overheard me in an interview very much like this one, and they asked me what subgenre of horror films would you never want to touch ever. And I said, oh, I never want to do a found footage movie. I don't like the format. I'm not interested in it. I find it a very limiting form. And then
Mm-hmm.
Jerry, who's very perverse, was sitting on the beach one day being like, all right, I got to think of a found footage movie that I can present to Jeremiah. And then, Jerry being Jerry, he was looking out of the water, thinking of story ideas, and he imagined a giant H.P. Lovecraft monster rising up out of the water and marching towards him. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Oh, there's the found footage movie right there.
Yeah.
We'll do a found footage elder gods monster movie." Which I thought was a pretty and crazy. How crazy is it to do that on such a low budget? It's kind
Yeah.
of bonkers, and I think that's one of the things I kind of enjoyed about the script was it's like Jerry kicked it off with a high level of ambition.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of do a serial killer movie or a torture porn movie or whatever, but it's very challenging with very little money to do H.P. Lovecraftian monsters that are rising up out of the ground, because immediately it's like we can't do it just with practical effects. We have to now incorporate a certain level of CGI, and how are we going to do that?
Right.
Anyway, he wrote the script without thinking of the budget. He was like, all right, monsters appear and people's heads explode and parasites come out, and there's an outbreak that's all along the east and west coast. Anywhere there's water, there's the shit is going down.
Mm-hmm.
And something that did give me inspiration was, George Romero didn't have any money when he made The Crazies, which is about
Mm-hmm.
an outbreak of madness. And I thought, well, he somehow figured out a way to make it work. And I mean, I thought that he managed to do a better job with the scale than we did. I mean, he was able to get in Pittsburgh a bunch of, Jeeps and military uniforms and so on, and machine guns and all this stuff. But I was like, okay, let's look back to Uncle George and see what he did. And then I also reread H.P. Lovecraft and Bram Stoker's Dracula. And of course, they're told in this epistolary format where it's like always people's diaries and newspaper articles and things like that. So I was like, oh, Dracula is kind of a found footage book.
Mm-hmm.
And H.P. Lovecraft is so often these like lawyers or scientists or men of reason who are like writing down what they saw in a document so that they can preserve it or share it with others.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I saw, and I'm trying to write it down now before I forget it, or I'm trying to write it down now so I don't go crazy. I was like, all right, that's a pretty good reason. The reason, you always watch these movies, and you're like, why don't you just shut off the damn camera and run?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, all right, if you're a scientist or if you're also it's like there's this paranoid conspiracy thriller thing that
Mm-hmm.
they put into it where everybody is filming everybody because one of the characters has a deeper purpose, and there's suspicions all around that, so everybody's filming everything as a way to cover this anomaly, which I also thought, I was like, well, that also to me is scary. This incredible lack of privacy, and that everybody is watching you, and there's a secret that you don't know, but you feel like something is sneaking up on you. And then whenever that story got boring, we could always cut to somebody else who's like, driving along in a truck filming, on their phone, trying to be like, something fucked up is going on down by the river and we got to film it. So in that way, like, I mean, I'm always happy when audiences like the movie. I think one of the things that does help a little bit is that every 5 to 10 minutes, like, we're able to cut to a bunch of other characters who are trying to figure out what's going on. So, so it's constantly changing the game and giving you new information or new characters to follow. And while I think World War Z, the book, does a much better job than we did, it's like, one of the things I liked about reading that book that it inspired me a little when we were doing Black Wake was that if you're following a bunch of different characters, then the situation becomes larger than any of them.
Yeah.
And if you're getting tired of a character, you can always jump to another character, and you're like, all right, I'm going to follow the other guy's story for a few minutes and see where that takes us. Which is something I enjoyed about Black Wake. It gave opportunities for us to get people like, Tom Sizemore in for a couple of days, and he's playing a detective, and we follow his story for a little bit. And then we cut to, back to our main scientist, and we go to these hunters in the woods, and we go to Eric Roberts, and we go to these other things. So it's something I found very pleasing. It created a kind of kaleidoscopic effect that's kind of different than if you're just telling one person's story.
Yeah, and it also makes the film feel a lot bigger than it might be budgetary-wise, because of the fact that you're, instead of just focusing on a couple of central characters like most found footage movies do, you're cutting to other people within the construct of this story as it's unfolding, and so you're not just stuck in the same place with the same characters for 80-90 minutes. You're getting the larger picture of what's going on. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that people, when they do the found footage, when they use the found footage structure, they're just going off of, oh, well, we'll just watch these people. Oh, this is like people just, we're going to be watching these people for 75 minutes as they go through this one situation. It's like, without really much context as to what the outside world is. I mean, something like, Paranormal Activity, you can sort of do that because of the fact that it's supposed to be two people in a house that might be haunted. But if you're doing something like the one that I'm thinking about is that was kind of disappointed was Chernobyl Diaries a few years ago. It's like that would have been such a much more interesting use of that if if the filmmakers had done a little bit more than just, oh, people decide they're going to go backpacking in Chernobyl and creepy stuff starts happening.
Right.
It's like, that's every other found footage movie. Why are we doing something different? That's one of the things that I think was interesting about not necessarily Cloverfield Paradox, but at least 10 Cloverfield Lane, where it's like, you take this idea, you're going off of this central idea that they had in Cloverfield, but you're doing a different take on it. And that's going to make the storytelling deeper. And so that's one of the things that I really liked about Black Wake, is that you weren't just following, this scientist, you were following a lot of different, it's a series of vignettes more than it is like a straightforward narrative. And that's one of the things I really liked about it.
Yeah, it's something I enjoyed in the edit as well, was the ability to follow a different vignette whenever you felt like it. So even people who hate the film, who think it's like Sharknado, I mean, I love Sharknado, but like anybody who's like, it's like the quality is like Sharknado 4, it's like, well, that's fine, it's like, but at least we keep changing the story every couple of minutes so that, so that it stays fresh. And then when people do like the movie, I think they like it for that reason, where they're like, all right, it's a fun cult movie that is bonkers, because every time, every time you're given a new piece of the mosaic, something weird and interesting and new happens. Now these government agents are here, now it's like, now the main character is part of a bigger conspiracy than we thought, now people are getting sick after reading this book or whatever, so it gave us a way to like gradually, tell the story, give new pieces of the puzzle, while at the same time not allowing the audience to get bored by being locked in with just a handful of characters in a house or something like that. Which, by the way, 10 Cloverfield Lane, I thought did a really good job of, it's like, to me, that movie was like about a makeshift dysfunctional family. It's like these three people trapped in the hole. And if you're going to be trapped with somebody, then cast John Goodman, who was so extraordinary in that movie. And it can be done. I mean, that movie is a classic case of like three characters in a bunker can be just as riveting as a cast of thousands. But yeah, I'm with you though. It's like a lot of found footage movies that are not Paranormal Activity, which I thought did a pretty good job of a couple people in a house. Just fall into the trap of like being like every other found footage movie. It's you can kind of tell when the filmmaker is like, oh, let's cash in. Let's just do this really easy story. Camera and 5 friends, and we can easily do a found footage movie. And just it's inevitably going to feel like a retread of movies that you've seen already that are better. It's like I've seen Blair Witch and I've seen Paranormal Activity, and those movies are very effective at what they do. But once you've seen like the 25th variation of that, where like the filmmakers are kind of half-heartedly cashing in, then you don't feel so excited about it. You're like, they're just doing the same old, it's like when I go to McDonald's, I know what a Big Mac tastes like. It's like there's nothing, it's like I'm not getting anything special. And at the very least, we hoped to do that with Black Wake, was at least try to push it a little further and try to do something different within the budgetary limitations.
What exactly you've said that you work primarily as director for hire. What exactly is it about? What gravitates you towards doing one project over another?
Well, it's usually the script. It's like if the script speaks to me, then I'll be excited. Like when I read Pickup, I found it as terrifying as any horror movie, and I immediately wanted to do it. I read it and said, this woman dealing with this sexual addiction is as scary as any body horror movie that you could think of. So immediately I was like, yes, I want to do it. I think that's beautifully written. But I did my first TV show for Discovery ID last year, and it was called Grave Mysteries, and I interviewed with the showrunner who'd seen Pickup, and she was like, I like your style, and I think that your dark, macabre, character-driven sensibility will be a good fit for our show, which is about, the ostensibly it's about solving crimes through digital formats, but really it's about uncovering like why people kill other people. It's like what is the root cause of murder. And I was like, well, I'm fascinated by that. I was always interested in true crime. So when I met the showrunner, Eve Roderick, and saw how smart she was, and saw how great her taste and sensibilities were, and how much she cared about making a great show in a format that can often be cheesy. These crime recreation shows are so often silly and cheesy. But this particular company, Lion Television, prides itself on making cinematic work, and I knew that the show would play to my strengths of stuff that's dark and characters who are dysfunctional and strange and other. So I knew that I'd be spending 3 or 4 months doing a TV show that I could gravitate towards. It's the kind of stuff that I would, read when I was in, high school. I'd be reading all these books about Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy and, all these murderers, just because once that also is kind of like a reality plus, it's like these people are not normal.
Yeah.
These people are a step beyond. And, it's like, when you watch a horror movie or you direct a horror show, or a crime show, you're able to examine that stuff safely. You're able to present that to the audience in a safe way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we can all watch this creepy thing together and observe and absorb and examine and say what does it mean. So that was a work for hire that I was like I really love exploring this world for 3 months and doing very, very dark films and very disturbing subject matter. It's like it doesn't take a toll. I mean, I like stuff that's dark. I like going there because I feel like when we're making a movie or a television show, we're playing make believe.
Yeah.
And we can do it safely. And like the safety of the cast and the crew is of paramount importance to me. It's like if everybody feels safe, then they can do subject matter that is reprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they know that it's all pretend. And because of that, they can go to the furthest region of their psyche, or they can go out on an edge, like if their character is doing something really disturbing. They know
Mm-hmm.
they themselves are an actor who is performing this and then is able to come back after we finish, and having explored this thing. The actors who I really love working with, like Lucas Hassel is a guy who acted in a bunch of movies for me. He was the monster in Slapface. He
Mm-hmm.
played really disturbed guys in The Minions and a bunch of other films that I've done. And, he is incredibly curious. He is a fearless actor. He's not afraid to like do very creepy stuff on camera because he knows that he'll come back from it. It's like
Yeah.
he knows that, he knows that that is a way for him to explore playing the murderer, the disturbed guy, the guy who is insane, who sees the world in a different way than we do. And then when it's done, he can come back.
Mm-hmm.
Just as you watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Tobe Hooper version, and you feel like you're going out of your fucking mind while you're watching it.
Yeah.
It's you feel like it was made by crazy people, and you're going crazy while you're watching it, and then it's over, and you're kind of like, wow, now that was an experience, and I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been through something. In a way that might even feel deeper than if you go on a roller coaster or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, because it's kind of attached itself to your psyche for 85 minutes or however long it is. So that's why I love making these things. And when I look at a work for hire, I often ask myself the question of like, do I love the script? Am I doing something I haven't done before? And do I want to live in this world for however long it takes me to make this movie? Like we made Black Wake for, I mean, from like starting from like when Jerry wrote the script to us being finished, it was probably like 3 years of living in Black Wake. It's like not every day. It's
Right,
like
right.
you're shooting it for like 2.5 weeks spread out over time, and you're editing it for like you're editing it for like 9 months before visual effects come in, and they're editing it for, then you're doing visual effects for another 9 months because
Mm-hmm.
there's like 60 visual effects shots in that movie, which is a lot for an independent film.
Yeah.
It's like and it's demanding things like giant monsters and stuff. So that means those monsters have to be designed. Those monsters have to, you have to figure out what does the monster look like. We went through many different designs before the animation stuff even starts. So when you choose a work for hire that's a feature, a good question to ask is, do I want to live in this world for 3 years? Can I collaborate with these people for 3 years? Like the
Mm-hmm.
producer, Carlos Keys, I met him, and, it's like, I have to spend 3 years with this guy at least. And then it's not over after that either. It's like, then there's press, and then there's festivals, and then there's Black Wake 2, maybe,
Yeah.
it's like, so you have to really, I learned that on my very first feature. I knew that I knew that my crew and the cast and I were not going to get along with these producers. I just knew it from a million miles away. But I said, this was a movie called The Sadist, which starred the great Tom Savini, and
Okay.
the Killer in the Woods movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, but we did not get along with the producers at all. Nobody did. And they didn't like me, and I didn't like them. And it was just a really horrible experience for all of us, And so since then, I've been way more cautious,
Mm-hmm.
And I try, especially, I mean, like on any project, you just, it's like you have to ask yourself, who am I working with? Because the child, that we have, this movie, is going to resemble both of us,
Yeah.
and do I that person's taste, do I like that person? Do I like their sensibility? because we're going to share this experience. It's going to have my fingerprints on it and your fingerprints on it, and it's going to be both of us. And if I don't trust your taste, or if you don't trust mine, we're going to have problems. The thing I'm happiest about with Black Wake was that Jerry Janda, who wrote it, he wrote most of it. It's like it's his script.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a Jerry Janda movie, because I never would have thought of H.P. Lovecraft monsters coming up out of the sea. I never would have thought of these zombies that have exploding heads and parasites. I know you probably got that from Night of the Creeps, but but nevertheless, it's like still a pretty zany premise.
Mm-hmm.
Where zombies are a little bit different than other zombies. They can talk, they can do this other stuff, and they're kind of fascinated by other stuff. So they aren't exactly George Romero zombies. I liked that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a work for hire where it wasn't mine, and I don't like found footage, and and I wouldn't have written it, but I read it and I was like, Jerry, this is fascinating. This is bonkers. This is a crazy idea. This is an insane idea. And I guess he responded, well, thank you. And Jerry, if you ever meet him, he doesn't go to festivals very often. He's very shy. He's a very quiet, professorial, mild-mannered guy. He has a very small cameo in Black Wake. He's one of the cops who shows up in the last like 20 minutes or whatever.
Okay.
But Jerry, like if it's like David Cronenberg. You would imagine David Cronenberg to be a freak. He does movies about TV sets that start kissing people and guys who reach into their stomachs and pull guns out. And then you look at David Cronenberg, he looks like a tax accountant.
Yeah.
And Jerry Janda looks like he should be teaching biology. It's like today science. He writes on the blackboard. And then he writes this perverse, weird, upsetting, crazy shit. And you're like, Jerry, where did you think of that? And he's like, well, I was reading about these beetles that feed on other beetles and then mutate into new things, and it gave me the idea for these parasites or whatever. And you're like, Jesus Christ, man, you are nobody knows, but I do. Anyway, work for hire. It's like choose the people you work with carefully.
Yeah. And obviously you have to love the story, and that's the most important thing, especially, I mean, as a storytellers, you want to be able to tell that story. Who are some of the filmmakers that have inspired you the most over the years?
Well, a bunch of them passed away recently. George Romero and Jonathan Demme both passed away in the same year. And Jonathan Demme, who did Silence of the Lambs and so many other great films, Something Wild and Married to the Mob, and he did the remake of The Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah.
He was a great humanist. It's like you watch Silence of the Lambs and you feel like he loves all the characters.
Yeah.
He loves Jodie Foster, and he's fascinated by Anthony Hopkins, and he respects Scott Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
And he loves to hate the guy playing Dr. Chilton because he's just so wonderfly corrosive. And then Jamie Gumb, played by Ted Levine, is like so strange and outlandish. You see his house, and you're like, it's so decorated, and you're like, they spent time thinking about him.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that really, and it's not that they want to be him. It's that when that character gets blown away at the end of the movie, I saw it in like whatever year it came out. I think it was 1991, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was 91.
Yeah, I remember around that time there were so many movies like Fatal Attraction and that one with Julia Roberts where the bad guy is chasing after her, where like the bad guy gets killed, but then the bad guy jumps up again after being killed, whatever. And in Silence of the Lambs, she shoots him, and then she's reloading her gun, and Buffalo Bill is lying there on the ground, like spitting up blood and coughing and dying like an insect that salt has been poured on. And it's just like his arms are flailing, and he's just dying in this shot that doesn't cut, and you're just watching him die, and it's really horrible. And it's just like, and you're I have no sympathy for serial killers. I believe, I mean, I'm a left-wing liberal guy, except about the death penalty, where I'm for it. I mean, it's like John Wayne Gacy should go to the fucking electric chair.
Mm-hmm.
But you got Silence of the Lambs, and it's like, man, it's really tough watching this guy die, knowing how horrible he is, knowing that he was going to carve up this woman and turn her into a fucking suit,
Yeah.
knowing that he's crazy and demented and disturbed and probably deserves it. It's still awful. And there's empathy in that, that was incredibly moving. I was like really shocked. I was like, Jonathan Demme doesn't love this guy, but he empathizes with him and he cares enough to like show the guy dying because he's a human being who just got blown away.
Yeah.
And with that, at the same time, he tells the story of the woman in the well, played by Brooke Smith, the senator's daughter, who is so strong and so capable. And she captures the dog and is incredibly skillful at trying to navigate her survival and negotiate her survival. She's not just some, it's like a lot, and then you realize that a lot of time in horror movies, the female victim is so helpless.
Oh yeah.
And in this, she's trying to take the power back, and she has a personality and a character and a will and a desire, and she's a real person, and it's just like, man, why can't we should treat all of our characters this way. So Jonathan Demme in that way was a huge inspiration, where it's like, try to love all of your characters and try to spend time with all of your actors, so that all of your actors kind of treat it as if they're the main character in the story of Black Wake or Slapface or whatever it is. Dad is slapping the kid in Slapface. It's not like I want to beat my child. Yeah. It's to shake this kid up because the kid is not with me right now, and I have to get him with me. I have to connect with him. And if this is the only way I can connect with him, by slapping him in the face and getting him to slap me, then hopefully we can break through. Because the actor can't play, I'm the monster, I'm the villain, I am the, the ogre, in Black Wake, it's like those government agents, who are like kind of reprehensible, when you think about what their mission is, they're looking at it as, we are on the brink of something extraordinary and we have to follow it through so that the extraordinary thing happens, and we will be on the front line of that thing. Yeah. In a case one of the guys feels a little bad about like, what's going on. He's like, I feel bad about the people who got killed. The other guy's like, we have to stay on the mission. And he's not saying it because he's evil. He's saying it because they have he considers them to have a greater task. And I don't know if I would have had that empathy for all the characters without having seen so many of Jonathan Demme's wonderful films. Yeah. And I think Romero and Dawn of the Dead has a very, like you watch Dawn of the Dead and all four of those guys in the shopping mall, you love all of them. Even, Flyboy, you're like, oh man, what a dick. But then you love him, you're like, no, he's just trying to keep it together, and Roger is a goof. And you're like, Roger, stop fucking goofing off or you're going to get killed. But, it's like, but then you love that he's got this joie de vivre, and you feel really bad, and, when stuff happens to the characters in Dawn of the Dead, even down to the zombies, when the, like, there's the bit where Galen Ross's character is in the store, and there's a zombie nun whose cloak is like kind of in the door, and she kind of opens the door really quick and then closes it so that the zombie can be free. And it's just like, man, it's like George Romero has enormous sympathy for the monster. It's like he kind of, in some ways, has more sympathy for the monster than for the humans. And that became more and more evident in his later stuff. Which is fascinating. But yeah, empathy, I guess, is the thing I learned from Jonathan Demme and George Romero, who are two of the greatest filmmakers I've ever got the chance to watch their films. Thank God both of those guys made movies, because they brought such a great gift to all of us. Yeah.
So you've got the release, the home release of Black Wake coming in August. Where is that going to be available for everybody?
Well, I like to tell people it's going to be at Walmarts everywhere, which is true. It's like, it's in a lot of those kind of stores where they sell DVDs and Blu-rays. Black Wake will be available. So I know for sure Walmart, and I know there are other outlets, probably places like Target and stuff like that, where it'll be available if you have DVDs and Blu-rays on your shelf. Oh, absolutely. And Amazon is where it's on VOD. I know there are other VOD outlets for it, but I know Amazon is doing pre-orders for Black Wake, so people can search on Amazon for Black Wake, type it in, and then they'll find the link to Black Wake, and then they can pre-order it, and then it will arrive on August 7th and then they can do a one-time viewing or download it and watch it as many times as they want.
Okay. What do you have coming up next as a
Well, it's
filmmaker?
I'm in the midst of a negotiation right now. It's once Black Wake sold to Sony, that opened quite a few doors, and with Slapface playing the festival circuit and Black Wake selling at the same time, it kind of became a perfect storm where we optioned Slapface to a production company, and that option's about to expire. And then there's these other fellas who want to make the movie, and I'm talking to them again. Like the option expires like next week, so then I'm talking to them the day after the option expires to see if we can work a deal. These gentlemen who had a great success at South by Southwest, they had a film that did very well, so now they have this money, and they want to do a genre film, and they want to make something along the lines of the great films that are coming out, like The Babadook or Hereditary, where it's like a dysfunctional family with a creature or a supernatural force. And Slapface fits that model. So they loved the short, they loved the feature-length script, they loved the lookbook that we created, which tells how we're going to make the movie. And hopefully, and they seem like the right people. They seem like they're at the right level of independent filmmaking, where what they want and what I want are actually meeting. So I hope, knock on wood, I'm knocking on my thick skull right now. Hopefully, we'll be able to carve out a deal and get Slapface going. I should hopefully have more information about that within the next couple of weeks. But that is my main agenda right now, is getting the Slapface feature made. And I've kind of been holding off on other projects just because I want to put all my energy into this feature. So we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. But I'm very happy that the short version of Slapface and the feature-length Black Wake have been opening doors for the next project, whatever that project may be. Hopefully, Slapface, the feature.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that. I'm definitely interested in what a feature-length version of Slapface would look like. I'm definitely very. I really enjoyed watching the short, and I really thought it had some really fascinating ideas in it. So I'm curious to see what that would look like as a feature film. So I definitely hope that is able to get off the ground for you.
Thank you.
Before we close, where can people find you online?
Well, my website is kippfilms.com. That's KIPP, two P's like Paul, films, FILMS.com. So on the media page, there's a bunch of my work that's available for public viewing. And then I'm very active on social media. So I use Facebook as a way to not just market my work, but share my enthusiasm for what's going on in the world of horror. So I like to try to highlight other actors and filmmakers and folks that are out there making stuff, or festivals that I've really enjoyed. If you do the search for Jeremiah Kipp, I usually, within reason, accept friends and try to get the word out about what's going on through that and Instagram.
One final question. What are some of the horror movies? We've already talked about a few. What are some of the horror movies that have inspired you the most over the years?
Well, gosh, the one that scares me the most is actually the Invasion of the Body Snatcher movies. The 1950s one, the 1970s one, and then Abel Ferrara made one, I think in the 90s. And we'll ignore the Nicole Kidman one that I thought was a travesty. But there's something in those movies that was speaking to those places and those times.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a time capsule for those eras, but then also taps into a really deep fear that I have in my life, which is to be convinced of a belief that I don't have, or to be transformed into someone else, or to be made to believe something I don't believe. I mean, I was sort of weirdly terrified of cults when I was a kid, like Jim Jones and Jonestown, and or of anybody getting inside of your head, which is why I also find the thing so terrifying. It's like you are not you anymore. You are this other thing that is going to take you over, and the body snatchers were going to take over everything. And I thought all three of them were great movies. And the Abel Ferrara one, how Body Snatcher literally say, where are you going to run? Where are you going to hide? Nowhere, because there's no one like you left. Which I think is that primal fear that you have when you see those few human characters running around in a cityscape where everyone else is chasing after them. I can't think of anything more nightmarish than that. So Invasion, so the Don Siegel, Phil Kaufman, and Abel Ferrara Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I think are some of the most astonishing genre films that I've ever seen. And I think we're long overdue for another variation of that. And I think our contemporary climate of distrust, no matter what your political party is, is truly frightening. And all that stuff about us living in a post-truth world and so on, all that stuff is like ripe metaphor for Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah. Well, Jeremiah, thank you very much for talking with me today.
Thank you.
And yeah, this was a lot of fun. Your filmmaker's been on my radar for a few years now because of your shorts, and it's great to see that you've had success with Black Wake, and yeah, I definitely hope that leads to bigger things for you, including a feature-length version of Slapface. I'm definitely looking forward to that if it gets off the ground. So,
well, thank you, man. I'll certainly keep you posted on whatever comes next.
I'd like to thank Jeremiah for joining me on the podcast today. It was really great to hear him talk about his career, what inspires him, the type of movies that have inspired him, as well as the way he's been inspired as he's made movies such as Slapface and Black Wake. Again, Black Wake is going to be available on August 7th through Sony Home Entertainment. That's it for now. August, as far as patrons go, is going to be more movie-related heavy, including a commentary that has never been heard on Sonic Cinema before. It's one that we did, my friend Ronnie Haynes and I did a while back. And I'm also going to go a little bit more into one of the chapters of the book that I hope to publish sometime in the future. Why is the rabbit wearing sunglasses? So that's it for me. Thank you for listening to the Sonic Cinema podcast. And this is Brian Scuttle, and I hope you enjoy it, what you've heard, and that you continue to listen. I've got some more really great things coming up.